different. We're embracing the wild in the name, and we're going off Star Wars Unlimited, but we're still staying with Star Wars here. They recently announced that Kathleen Kennedy is out as kind of the directing head or whatever her title was at Disney for the Star Wars projects, and Dave Filoni is in. So I thought, hey, let's do a little Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars era, Disney era report card for the live action shows, because sometimes you just like talking about Star Wars, right? So I've got the live action shows here, kind of go over them, how I thought about them. Now, these are my opinions. I know that lots of people like different things, so maybe you'll be on the same page with me for some of these, maybe you won't. At the risk of pissing some people off, I'll share my opinions, but whatever. If you think differently, that's cool. If you enjoy things that I don't enjoy, that's awesome. A little bit of background so you know where I'm coming from. My history as a Star Wars fan, I'm in the generation that was a little too young, or a little too young to miss the theatrical releases. So I grew up with Star Wars on VHS, and I kind of got introduced to the movies when I was 6 years old or so. So that would be 1990, and then they didn't really have anything else Star Wars planned for the next while. It was just done. It just was what it was. What they did have, however, was the EU, and so novels upon novels and comic books, and the West End Games role-playing game, which I played with some friends, and so that was Star Wars for people that are my age, and it was awesome. I loved the novels. They were, there were some incredible ones. There were some ones that were not as great, but lots of cool stories and lots of entertainment in the Star Wars universe still. And then in the late 90s, the prequels came out, and that was awesome to get new Star Wars. And then the early 2000s, I guess. No, when did the sequels come out? Not early 2000s. Late 2010s. I don't know. I can't remember. I'm bad with dates. But anyway, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with these. I love Star Wars. Always have. I try to look at the positives of things and take away what I enjoyed rather than be negative. I don't really like being negative, but I'm a fan and I want things to be good. And when you see a company with the resources that Disney has, kind of fumbling the bag, not to give away what I think of some of these projects, but it's not too much to expect, right? You're a multi-million-dollar company, just make decent stuff. So anyway, before we talk specifics, a couple broad things. These are just like pet peeves. They're not going to make or break a movie at all, but just things that have always, slightly irritated me. Enough with the droids. Like, it feels like every single one of these shows and movies has the droid sidekick. And in my head, Luke was the anomaly, where I guess like starfighter pilots in general would maybe be a little more attached to their droids because they, work with them in combat. But like to 99% of the galaxy, they treat them like Hondas, right? These are appliances, these are toasters. So I've never understood this obsession with Disney Star Wars to be like, oh yeah, the droids, we gotta have the cool droid. It's almost like they think that's what Star Wars is, but whatever. Anyhow, and then the other thing is the like misplaced humor, something that always bothers me. Like I'm fine if you got jokes and humor, and that's all good and fun. But like sometimes it's just in the worst spot. Like it's a really intense scene, and then you got a character cracking a joke, and I don't know. Take your universe seriously a little bit. I think I think that's part of the problem is that Marvel was very successful, but they did the humor thing, woven in everywhere, which maybe in a comic book setting is a little more appropriate. But anyhow, just my opinion. Maybe you love that sort of stuff. Uh, and then talking about some of the good stuff for all these shows, I think this applies. So I might not bring it up specifically from show to show, but I think the visuals is one thing that they are just nailing everywhere. There's always beautiful scenes, always these really interesting settings in these different worlds, the colors, the contrast, you know, even if I'm not appreciating other things in the show that are going around, I can always appreciate the environments. There's these moments of beauty that are really cool to see. And then the acting, they have got some unreal acting talent on these shows, which is great. Zero complaints with the people that they've picked and how they've done in the live action era. The sound is another one. They've kind of like continued this legacy of Star Wars having these amazing soundtracks and these powerful, epic, songs in them. And some of them are a little more traditional, and others have like moved into these kind of different, different, more unique and original, but still good. And then I feel like all these shows do a good job of like expanding the universe in that there's so much out there. So they're constantly kind of showing new races, new alien species, new planets to explore, new kind of details of these cultures or these groups or organizations, that haven't been explored yet. So those are all things that I think these shows do well. Okay, so let's go over here. We're just going to go in order that they are here. We're going to talk about The Acolyte.
Thank you for leading me to her. We make a great team.
So, I think those two do make a good team. Since I thought they were the most interesting characters in the show. Soul, to me, felt pretty rounded, like seeing him grapple with his past and his actions and a little bit with the Jedi Order overall was interesting. And then I liked their take on the Stranger, or Kimir, I'm not sure, as a villain. Just very manipulative and subtle, as opposed to like a kind of in your face, screaming evil, overpower you villain, which a lot of the shows have. So he's all about like causing chaos and bending people and getting them to, think twice about what they're doing and that sort of thing. So yeah, I like that as far as those characters. I think at its core, the show had a really interesting concept with trying to get into the question of, are the Jedi good or bad? Not that they're still the good guys, right? But is their process, is what they're doing, is that like moral? Is it ethical? And I know for some people that's gonna be like an immediate, you can't question the Jedi. Star Wars has always been very black and white, good guys, bad guys, and I think that's true. I do think this is like a departure, but I think there's room for that, right? In Marvel, they have all these different types of shows that kind of lean one way or the other. Like Ant-Man is kind of like a take on heist films, and the second Doctor Strange had that horror spin to it. So this one is just like a little bit different than the traditional black and white Star Wars. It's got this kind of gray, and for adult viewers, which I think a lot of the viewers are, I think that's something that's worth exploring. So yeah, overall I enjoyed it. The costumes, the sets. I like that it was set in the Old Republic. It gives them a lot of leeway there to tell new stories. They're not, kind of maneuvering around existing canon and established stuff. So that's cool. They're dipping into different colors of lightsaber blades and different types of lightsaber weapons with the whip that Vernestra has. So that's cool. Aside from Sol and Kamir, the other characters felt a little bit flat. Like Osha doesn't feel like she has a lot of agency. She's just kind of being pulled around from place to place a little bit. Until the end, obviously, when she is kind of making that decision to kind of go her own way. So yeah, I guess it turned around later in the end. But in the first half of the show, I don't know, she's kind of a passenger, I felt like. I didn't love the whole bleeding the saber thing, but I know it's something that is in the new canon and new lore. But as someone who grew up on the books, that was never a thing, right? It was the crystals in there. That's what gave the color. So it's just hard for me to like reset my understanding. So maybe that's just a personal thing. And then there was some of the writing early in the show wasn't great. Like there's a lot of exposition dumps. Um, and one scene that I couldn't get out of my head was like Soul saying, "Oh, her sister can't be alive. I watched her die." And then like 2 minutes later, Bosha's like, "Oh yeah, my sister's alive." He's like, "Okay, I believe you." Oh, okay, sure. That's all it takes, eh? But maybe it's good. Maybe you're supposed to believe people you trust. I don't know if he trusts her. Maybe he's just saying that to her. Anyway, doesn't matter. Um, Overall, I'm gonna put this right in the middle. I think maybe it's B. Maybe a C. I'll say C. I think there was nothing that was like really truly amazing. It had some cool scenes in it, and something else that they do. There's always cool scenes, right? They focus on like, oh, let's have this cool lightsaber fight scene and stuff, and that's great. That's part of the visuals that I think make these shows great. As far as like a so I think most of these grades are going to be more of like a story and writing uh, perspective for me personally. So yeah, somewhere between B and C. We'll go C for now. Maybe I should be positive. We'll go B. We'll go B. There we go. All right. Next up, we have Ahsoka.
I knew I could count on you.
All right, so I went with that clip because I feel like the show was created just for that moment, right? Like, to me, I really enjoyed Clone Wars, the last 4 seasons or 5 seasons specifically. I enjoyed Ahsoka as a character. I really liked Rebels. I liked the tie-in that they had there, but it felt like their stories were all complete. They got the endings they wanted. They had their arcs. You know, I also understand that these are like Filoni's children. These are his precious, so he wanted to bring them to live action. Maybe I would have preferred if they would have like not gone ahead in time, but gone back and filled in some other areas of the past. But you know what? It's okay. That's just my personal preference. That doesn't mean the story, isn't good. I was a little bit concerned with how they were going to handle Thrawn, one of the all-time, coolest characters. Uh, if you haven't read the Heir to the Empire trilogy, it is definitely worth reading. Although, as someone who, for me, like the Heir to the Empire trilogy was my sequels. That was because that's all there was back then. And so to see that character dragged into Rebels and kind of like, not that they didn't do him well, it was okay, but it's pretty hard to stack up to those novels. So in the show, there was a couple times where I'm like, I don't love that this is, Thrawn and how they're doing him. I thought the end was good. I thought that, it was a cool way to defeat this guy who's supposed to be a tactical master genius. Was this something that he could have never predicted and never expected to have, that as something that takes him out. But then I feel like, okay, Ezra made a sacrifice, Thrawn's gone. It's a good way to wrap it up. You bring them back, you're opening up a whole new can of worms, and now you got to like re-navigate this tricky space of writing for this villain who's supposed to be like a mastermind villain. So how do you take him out the next time? The other thing is I've never loved the father daughter son story, which is like connected to Abeloth in the novels, which was, I don't know, as far as the novel stories go, that was one of my least favorite. I just don't feel the need to explore like a Star Wars mythology and creation of the universe stuff and the creation of the Force. Just leave it alone. Just let it be there and just explore the universe. So yeah, the Mortis storyline in Rebels 2, I was didn't love that. So I wasn't pumped that that's where they went, but that's okay. Those are just my personal biases. Try and enjoy it. I think there's some fantastic moments. I do think Ezra and Sabine interacting, they did very well. They nailed it. Just a fantastic job of portraying two old friends. The teasing, but then being comfortable enough with each other to be themselves. Um, I liked bringing in Balin. Another Jedi who kind of like Ahsoka left the Order, saw the flaws in it, went their own way, but took it a completely different direction. So that's interesting. Um, Interested to see where they go with his character. A couple things, did they have to make Sabine a Jedi? I don't know. She was already cool enough, right? She was a Mandalorian. I don't know if she needs that as part of her character, but they really wanted to do the mentor Padawan thing with Ahsoka. But again, is that an arc that Ahsoka needs? She kind of already had her thing with, doing the Fulcrum thing and starting to help the fledgling rebellion and that sort of thing. Does she need a teacher arc? I don't know. I think maybe if they would have given her one that's a little more unorthodox, closer to her character, um, she wouldn't have been she wouldn't have been teaching in traditional Jedi methods. That's just my opinion, though. And yeah, I felt like in Rebels, you kind of had the Hera Sabine mentor mentee dynamic. So now to have Ahsoka in that place feels like a little bit strange, but I do think, despite my like personal, you know, disconnect from that story, the actors do a really good job of portraying this kind of like rocky relationship where they're uncomfortable and awkward history, and there is still that underlying bond there. Um, so yeah, like I mentioned earlier, acting in these shows is always great, and this show for sure is up there. Like Rosario Dawson and Natasha Borduza, whoever. I don't know how to say her last name, but she plays Sabine, and then Lars Mikkelsen is Thrawn, Ray Stevenson, Balin. I thought they were all really good. Um, and who's Hera's actress again? Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Is that it? Yeah, all very good. Even Ivana Sakno plays Shin. So like a relatively minor character, but she still does a good job like showing that intensity and hunger, which is I think supposed to be part of her character. So yeah, visuals again, massive win. Music is like a little bit ethereal, mystical, so different from traditional Star Wars music was great. The writing here a little bit hit and miss for me. The dialogue was fine, I think. Um, it felt like natural characters speaking, which not all the shows write their dialogue in that way. There were some issues with like what characters were saying is just what's happening on screen, which I can't. Yeah, it just boggles my mind that they're like, yeah, this is how we should write dialogue. And Filoni does love his like what some people would call fan service. I call it like original trilogy plagiarism, where he's just like recreating scene for scene, shot for shot, some scenes or word for word lines and quotes. I don't love that stuff. I know there's some people that do, but to me, it's just annoying. Not the end of the world, I think. And I've kind of, by the time Ahsoka rolled around, I could kind of see that this is how Disney was doing it. So whatever. The bigger like problem with the writing for me is like the inconsistency, like character actions not lining up with things they had said or doing things that don't make sense. At times, it feels a little bit like the characters are like in a role playing game and they're like really bad at separating like character knowledge from player knowledge. So they're like talking about things they wouldn't know or basing their actions on things they don't know. But I think like from inconsistency point, at one point Ezra doesn't want to borrow a weapon from Sabine. He's talking about, yeah, I fight with the Force now, the Force is enough, which is like such a cool concept. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like I hadn't thought about that before as a style. But it makes total sense, right? If you have such mastery of the Force, you don't need a weapon. You'll just use the Force to take care of things. But then 30 seconds later, he like picks up a blaster and starts blasting people. It's like, okay, whatever. That's too bad. That was a neat idea. And then like later, I think it's the same episode, Balin decides he's not going to fight Ezra and Sabine because he's got his own mission, that he wants to go off and search for whatever he's searching for on that planet. I was like, okay, cool. That's super cool. That fits with his character. Good call. And then Ahsoka shows up and he's like, oh, I have to stop you from interfering. It's like, well, you didn't care, 30 seconds ago what happened. You're going to go do your own thing. But I think they fall prey to like they really want the cool scene, where Balin and Ahsoka fight again, and it is cool for sure, but it doesn't really make sense in the context of the character. So that kind of stuff keeps happening throughout the show, which is annoying. Anyhow, I went in too long, but I really enjoyed Rebels and the Clone Wars, and I like these characters, so I'm a little more invested in them. So visuals are strong, acting strong. I'm not the target audience. I think I don't know. Do I think the writing is better than the Acolyte? It's pretty similar. I think I'm gonna put it lower just because my personal I had higher hopes. I had higher expectations for Ahsoka because I like the characters so much, and I don't know anything about the Acolyte, so I didn't have any expectations. So that's why I think when I watched it, I was like, oh, okay, cool, good show. So is one show better than the other? Probably. They're probably about the same. But I think maybe I was a little bit disappointed in Ahsoka. We'll see how season 2 goes. I did just watch the trailer though, and they are doing the Abeloth storyline, which I was like, no, damn it, that's like the worst storyline of all the novels that you could pick. But it does give me hope. They are taking some things from the novels, and oh yeah, the other thing is in one of the episodes of Ahsoka, they literally say, "Do you want Thrawn to become the heir to the Empire?" And I know that was supposed to be like a cool nod to the novels, but it's just like kind of like a slap in the face. It's like, oh, that storyline wasn't good enough for you. You had to make up your own storyline. And now you're going to reference it. Anyhow, whatever. Okay, moving on. Andor.
Well, it's been a day of surprises for all of us. I'm offering you everything you want, all at once.
What is everything I want?
I picked that clip because Andor surprised me, and it was everything that I wanted. After I thought for a long time, a lot of Disney shows that they're not going to get there. Andor was what I've been looking for. Masterpiece. This is amazing. I'm gonna rank it and then talk about it. It's here. It's at the top. It's the best. It's the best show. It is in my mind. I think this is what happens when you hire, a single person with a vision. Like, I don't know if it's director, writer, showrunner, whatever it is. So you put Tony Gilroy in charge and you say, go make a show. And they just, instead of setting out to make a Star Wars show or a show that feels Star Warsy, they just go out there and make a good show that happens to be set in the Star Wars universe. The writing is just amazing in this show, and I think it stands out because they don't do that thing where the characters are just like constantly describing what's happening on the screen, or repeating the main plot points that you already know. They use like subtlety in their writing, and I think like the perfect example of this is, oh, by the way, spoilers for all this. I guess you probably figured that out now, but if you haven't watched Andor, stop, go watch Andor, then come back. Perfect example is like the Take-Homa storyline resolution in season 2. None of the characters ever say out loud what's happening, but from their like inferences and their emotional reactions and their physical body language, what's happening. It's very clear. So yeah, they don't have to say it. They just let the characters' emotions tell the story. I think one thing that this show does really well is showing like character growth and development, and people if people don't like this show, it's because they say it's boring, but I think that those scenes that are boring are like the character development scenes. You need those. You can't just go from action set piece to action set piece. That's fine, that's entertaining, that's like summer blockbuster, but it won't give you any depth, whereas this show really had the depth. So yeah, instead of being a plot driven show, I think it's really character driven show. And then the writing, some of the speeches, just like Nemec's manifesto or Lucen's speech about the price he pays for, burning his decency for the cause. That kind of stuff is amazing. Mon's speech in the Senate, just incredibly well written. And then the actors again, you know, Genevieve O'Reilly, Diego Luna, Stellan Skarsgård, Denise Gu, Dedra's actress, and then Kyle Soller as how come I can't think of his name? Brain fart. You know, I'm talking about the security guy. And then the supporting cast is just fantastic as well. So yeah, the sound design, you know, set design, costumes, everything is great. Makes the galaxy feel like a really lived-in place. I love the ISB, and you kind of get an inside look at like their meetings and how they're trying to run the Empire. That was really cool. I think the one thing that was annoying to me is that they like felt the need to really connect it, you know, kind of shot for shot, butting up into Rogue One. I would rather just in general they didn't do that, just to give some space for other stories to be out there. But, you know, whatever, not the end of the day. Anyhow, I could talk for more about how amazing this is. I'm going to stop there. Pick any episode and or watch 15 minutes. There's something in it that makes you go, wow. That's why it's the best.
The locals are attacking.
I thought we had a treaty.
So did I.
They laid a trap!
I apologize for the extremely abrupt transition from the best show to the worst show. Let's be honest here. Book of Boba Fett is the worst show for sure. We're putting it down there. It gets an F. I picked that clip because it perfectly illustrates what so much of the dialogue of the show is, just like describing what's happening. Like, yeah, it's a trap. Yep, we can see that from the way they're pulling weapons out of from hiding, and these two are sitting there. Oh, I thought we had a truce. Well, obviously you don't have a truce anymore. They're shooting your people, right? And so yeah, that's the dialogue just gets that way sometimes, and it is frustrating to watch. Okay, I should be nice. My goal is to be as positive as I can. When there's not a fight scene happening, excluding the fight scenes, the visuals are still very good in this show. I do appreciate a lot of the attention to detail. It does, you know, feels like Mos Eisley, feels like Tatooine. You know, Jabba's palace, the sets look good. I'm not sure if they're on location or it's a green screen or what they're doing with that, but it does look nice a lot of the time. Unfortunately, a lot of the other time it feels like a low budget fan film with like the fighting action shots, and yeah, a lot of the dialogue, like I mentioned. The story's fine. It is what it is. But the other stuff is just hard to stomach. So unlike Andor, where yeah, you just are surrounded by brilliance. If you pick any 15 minutes of the book Boba Fett, you're probably going to find something that makes you laugh out loud, not in a good way. So, goes to the bottom. We're done talking about it. Let's move on. All right. I picked that clip just because Mandalorian, you know, came out of nowhere. Just like in the clip, nobody knew what it was. It was the first show they did. They had a lot riding on it in first live action to kind of see whether, you know, the other shows would succeed or not. Was a little bit based off of this one. So, yeah, they were throwing a dart at the wall to see, and I thought, yeah, season one had some really great visuals. You know, the music for sure. You kind of heard that kind of gunslinger, Lone Ranger music in that clip. Gave it a totally unique feel, and kind of set the tone for the show, which is great. I thought the visuals, the tone, the sound was all fantastic for this show. I didn't mind that it was like episodic. Everything was kind of like, you had the overarching plot of season one that he's just trying to keep Grogu safe, but each episode was kind of like unrelated to the others. It was just him off on his adventures. I mean, I did love Grogu. I thought he was kind of a gimmick, but whatever. It is what it is. You need some of that stuff. The one big downside is that you have your best actor, Pedro Pascal, hidden behind a mask, uh, and supposed to be this kind of really like stoic, never talks guy. So you don't really get to see his motivation or character struggle or growth that much. But for like a fun action show, yeah, I think it was fine. I think again the writing was a little bit. Most of the dialogue kind of fell into the three categories of like either explaining the plot, you know, or what's happening on the screen, or like cliches or like cheesy one-liners. That was kind of like their bread and butter. Like it felt a little bit like if you asked a computer to write AI or to write Star Wars dialogue, AI would kind of pump out stuff like this, but so it was a little bit clunky. The only character that really felt like they were talking like a someone would talk was Bill Burr. I feel like that's probably because he improvised a lot of his lines, or maybe it was just his accent. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe that was all written for him, but sometimes they're like saying things that are just completely nonsensical based on the situation, and it gets really bad in the season 1 finale. It was tough to watch, but I persevered. Season 2 and 3 I think got a little better. They had stronger plots kind of tying those seasons together, and they were exploring kind of the mythology of the Mandalorians and the tying it into the Imperial Remnant. I like that they eventually were setting it up for what Ahsoka would be, which is, you know, something we'll talk about later with the prequel trilogy or sequel trilogy. Sorry, didn't feel planned. I like at least that they kind of had a plan, you know, that feels good. Yeah, I don't know. It's overall, I think it was fine. I don't think it was amazing. I think it was like a decent action adventure. I'm gonna put it as average. I think I'm gonna put this down one too. I think these are like all pretty similar, like very watchable. I guess this one gets a bump for having like the most interesting story. I think the visuals in these two are better, and the music in these two are better. They're all pretty same. I think the acting in Ahsoka is probably the best, but maybe that should go up. Overall, if I put on any of these shows, I feel kind of the same about them. So we'll keep them together. All right. Next up, we have Kenobi. Okay, I showed that scene because it is. I'm conflicted about it. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but you can't deny that that is just a wicked looking scene. You know, the contrast of the two lightsabers, the moon in the background, the music, like, oh man, that when they want to and try to, they can definitely pump out some cool scenes. I was really excited about this show. Ewan McGregor reprising as Obi-Wan, sign me up. He was incredible. He's probably the best thing to happen to Star Wars in the last 3 decades. Overall, I thought the plot was strong. Like Vader out there with the Inquisitors hunting down the Jedi, the idea of the path, you know, people committed to protecting the Jedi. It's cool. I think Reva's story was interesting, being a youngling who was there when Anakin was going on his rampage. And I did like her arc at the end. I thought it was good. Kind of she, you know, gets past her revenge. So great ideas for the story overall. I'm not a big fan of child actors, but I thought the girl playing Leia was great. I don't know her name. I should have looked it up. I looked up the other actors' names before. I didn't come up with those off the top of my head, so I didn't look up her name. I apologize to the young lady playing Leia. They had a lot of little details that I liked, like the clone trooper begging at the beginning, kind of showing what would become a lot of those guys once the war was over. How big the galaxy was, and you know, after it was done using them, they just got cast aside. The Force user impersonator grifter guy, yeah, that was cool too. A cool idea that, yeah, of course there'd be people out there pretending to be Jedi and scamming people. I know a lot of people didn't like the idea that Obi-Wan was like struggling with the Force, but I thought it was cool, like kind of like a PTSD type thing where you kind of you're so traumatized you lose that connection. It was a neat idea. I didn't mind it at all. Yeah, great scenes. I think a lot of the scenes with him and Leia were really good, just kind of showing, how tormented he is, and showing the character that she will become. You get that great scene at the end where he gives her some insight into her parents and where her strengths come from. That was beautiful. It was powerful. Unfortunately, to get to some of those great scenes and cool scenes, they have to commit the cardinal sin that I just cannot abide, and that is, fucking with OT canon. They're so focused on making things that are cool, they don't think about how it interacts with what's come before. So like having Vader and Obi-Wan fight, and Obi-Wan and Leia go off on this adventure and grow really close. It When you watch New Hope, then it just doesn't track because Leia's talking like she's never met him before, and Vader's talking to Obi-Wan like he hasn't seen him since the Clone Wars. So that annoys me that they would like, yeah, it's a really cool show, a really cool concept, but then some of the things that you do are not going to line up with the original trilogy, which I think is like what you have to. Like, this is Star Wars. That's what started Star Wars. That should be like sacrosanct. That's just my view, though. Some other things like Vader saying, "I killed Anakin Skywalker." Like, why? Why would you do that? Like, now you're taking what in the original movies was a little white lie that Obi-Wan made up to kind of protect Luke and to kind of protect himself from the idea that he failed his Padawan. And now you're making it into truth that takes away from Obi-Wan's character. So I don't like stuff with that. Yeah, I think this show was definitely a cut above in like the writing and the character development, and so like I'm tempted to put it up here, but I can't, with the fact that they are just gonna overlook those kind of connections to the original trilogy. I can't. So this is like kind of like an alternate universe show in my mind. It's really good. I enjoyed watching it, but the times when they would do those things would just like it would totally pull me out of it. So that's too bad. All right, Skeleton Crew.
We gotta save our ship!
Okay, so in that clip I grabbed it because it kind of shows what the show's about. A bunch of kids going on an adventure. They got a spaceship. They're finding worlds. They're having a great time. Maybe, I guess they're having a difficult time some of the times. But I thought this show was awesome. It is what it is. It's not trying to be too much. It's trying to be an action adventure show made for younger audience, and I think that it's one that adults can enjoy too. My buddy called it Goonies in a Galaxy Far, Far Away. I think that's accurate. I think it's perfect. Yeah, the characters are good. They're unique. They stand out from each other. The plot, while predictable, isn't riddled with plot holes. And the writing and the dialogue they're all fine. They're all good enough. Costume set look great. Even though I'm not the target audience, I thought that show was a blast to watch. So, yeah, that's an A. A for me. Okay. Next, we are talking about Solo. All right, went with the Millennium Falcon clip there because who doesn't love to see the Falcon flying through hyperspace or space, or I guess they're going through the maw in that scene. I can't remember. There are some stinkers of lines in here. I will say that, like some really cheesy stuff, and like the kind of jokes that I'm fine with jokes but it should be jokes that like the characters in the show would laugh at. Like it should be funny to the other characters in the show. It shouldn't be something just designed to make the audience laugh and the characters wouldn't get the joke. If the characters wouldn't get the joke, I don't want you to put it in there. That's just my personal opinion. So like when the Imperial officer gives him the name Solo, I almost walked out of the theater. I was like, oh my gosh, this is rough. After that, it got better though. I think the plot was fine. Beckett and Kira were both, interesting characters. I think they were well rounded. Troy from Community killed it as Lando. Just perfect casting. And I think the young Han Solo, I didn't look up his name, I'm sorry. He had that Harrison Ford swagger. They wrote some great dialogue for him. He could get his sarcastic quips in, and a lot of them I think were timed well. At points it was like a little too slapstick, and like Lando, having this emotional connection with his droid was strange. Again, these are like toasters to these people, but that's just me. Yeah, overall I liked it. It was good. It did a good job of showing Han as like, he does have that heart of gold, but you can see him getting burned a couple times and how he'd become a little more jaded, kind of turn into the character that he is in A New Hope. One thing that bothered me again was like, with like the not leaving room. Like, why do they say at the very end, well, let's go look for Jabba? Like, he doesn't need to meet Jabba for like 20 years. He's got a whole career ahead of him before he gets tangled up with Jabba. But whatever. Anyway, not the end of the world. It's just nitpicky stuff. So I don't know why this movie was so poorly received. I thought it was good. I'm gonna put it here. Give it an A. Rogue One. Okay, so that clip I picked because I think they did the most important thing to me right. And to me, if they would have survived their suicide mission, it would have totally negated the whole, gravitas and how important their sacrifice was. So I I was very skeptical if Disney would or not. I was like, they're gonna sweep in with a ship and rescue them. This is gonna be bullshit. But they didn't. They didn't do it. So good for you, Disney. You made the hard choice. You made their sacrifice mean something. So, like Ahsoka, I didn't think this was a story that needed to be told. I think, yeah, how they got the plans. Sure. I mean, it's fine. It's interesting enough, I guess. But I think they really wanted to connect with some of the nostalgia of the OT after they had like kind of alienated some of their fan base with Force Awakens. I don't know. Maybe this movie was already in production. I can't remember. Maybe not. But this movie did result in Andor being made, so I'm grateful because Andor is the best. But I'm fine if they like explore other timelines and they don't have to jam everything in there. But that's okay. Aside from that, I thought it was, well paced, good visuals, enough development of Jin as a character, with the action scenes mixed in. There was a couple annoying things like giving Vader a one-liner, a cheesy one-liner. It was just irritating. The Lightmaker maneuver, pushing a Star Destroyer into another Star Destroyer to crash them. Like, come on, think about these things. If they could do that, why wouldn't they do that in every battle? Just have these things running around smashing into Star Destroyers. They should have just had that ship go down and ram the gate is what they should have done. But anyway, the hallway scene was like very cool. Again, they do a good job of making cool scenes, but sometimes they don't think about like what it's going to mean. Like the guy with the disc was like 6 feet away. Vader could have just snatched it with the Force. Easily rectify that by just having the disc deeper in the ship, and then you can do the same scene, but not going to make or break the movie. The one thing that does make or break the movie for me, though, is again not considering, the implications of how the original trilogy is impacted by your decisions. Why is Leia's ship hiding in the profundity? It's the stupidest thing they could have possibly done. A, she's a senator. Like, why would they send her into a war zone? They know what the profundity is doing. It's going on this mission. There's no way she should have been there. Just have her, she should have been, happened to be flying by the system and got beamed with plans. Then it would make the scene in A New Hope make sense. Instead, Vader should be saying, I literally just followed your ship from the battle at Scarif, instead of if this is a consular ship, where is the ambassador? Because he would have known. But anyway, they really wanted to jam AI Leia in the film. Just didn't even look good. So it just ends on a sour note and taints kind of everything they did. So it should be an A. Drop it down. It's a B. It's not that good. I mean, it's good. It's just that one thing for me is going to take you down a whole letter grade. Like, get those little details right, Disney. You're a $1 billion company. Figure it out. Okay. The Force Awakens.
Where am I?
You're my guest.
Alright, I picked that clip because that's how I feel if someone was to ever be like, hey, let's sit down and watch The Force Awakens. Yeah, you're my guest to this viewing, when instead I'm just chained there in torment. Because this movie was awful for anybody that grew up watching Star Wars. It was just complete plagiarism. Like, so offensively lazy in the writing. Like, don't tell me this is an homage. Like, you just took all the same story beats, all the same plot lines, and just did them again. Like, I don't understand. And I know it did well at the box office. It was a lot of kids' first time seeing Star Wars, and that's fine. But now, when they want to go see the other movies, they're going to watch A New Hope and be like, hey, this is just like The Force Awakens, and it's going to ruin those movies. So just don't be lazy. Just make your own movie. So it just pisses me off. It's an F. F for me. It's not even a real movie. It's just a cop-out. Last Jedi? Alright, I picked this scene because it's contentious. Luke's presentation in this film was contentious. And I'm gonna disagree with a lot of people and say that I think there's half a good movie here. I'm going to put it up there right now, giving it a B. I think there's half a good movie here. I like the Luke, Kylo, Rey. I was going to say Luke, then Rey, the Luke, the Rey, the Kylo interactions. I think that half of the movie is great. I think it's a very cool idea that, like, Luke thought that he would fail and maybe create somebody like Vader, and so he got scared. There's nothing wrong with characters not being perfect. In the end, he comes around and saves the day again. He is the hero, right? He stayed true to who he was. He just had to get over that, get over that struggle. All characters struggle. So I thought it was a really cool arc for Luke. Even the Canto Bight story, Finn and Rose, I like the idea behind it, right? You can't stay neutral. You have to pick a side. If you're just kind of ignoring what's going on and making money, that's not good enough. I don't think it was well executed. It's kind of too much silliness, too much goofiness. But I think, the kind of through line of the story was okay. The spaceship chase and Poe's storyline, yeah, that was kind of a miss for me. The Holdo hyperspace thing, yeah, that was... They can't, whatever. Dumb. But I feel like there's half of a good movie there. And, yeah, it's too bad. Alright, Rise of Skywalker. Alright, I picked that scene because, like I said, Disney can make cool scenes, and you can't deny that's not a cool scene. That's a really cool scene. Cool looking scene. Um, can they do scenes with strong emotional weight for the characters? Yeah, they're not as good as that. But for like fun action blockbusters, yeah, they can. Unfortunately, the plot is just ridiculous in this movie. I'm going to tell you right now, it's an F. It's going down here. It's just so bad. I can't even start to talk about it. Everything about it is just nonsense. It's really too bad because I think Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver are both great as Ray and Kylo. Oscar Isaac, fantastic actor, but they can't. The three of them can't save this movie. It's a total disaster. The biggest problem with the sequel trilogy is that I don't know why they didn't have a plan. It should have been. I don't care if it's J.J. Abrams. I don't care if it's Rian Johnson. Just pick one of them and let them make the whole trilogy. Uh, I don't want to crap on J.J. Abrams too much because the movies were both terrible, but I wonder how much that was Disney influence, right? How much they were pushing him. This is what the story has to be. This is what blah 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 blah. And then it didn't turn out great, so they bring in Rian Johnson for the second one to try and fix it, and he does his different thing, which is interesting. But I mean, he's trying to undo what's been done so he can tell a story that's unique and interesting and cool, and that doesn't work. So then they go back. It just I blame Disney more than I blame JJ or Rian Johnson for those movies. I think that's on them. They gotta plan better. But anyhow, that's what I think. That's what I think about Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy. Is it going to get better under Dave Filoni? I don't know. I think these are kind of his flagship shows, and they weren't my favorite. So we'll see. The one thing I do appreciate about him is it feels like he has a plan. It feels like he's tying them together and has a vision going forward. And they've shown willingness to pull things from the novels, so maybe they'll start pulling in good stuff and doing that. Anyhow, if you listen to all this, congrats on you. You have earned the opportunity to tell me how terrible my opinions are in the comments. Tell me which things I got wrong or which things I got right. Love to hear from you. Love talking Star Wars nerd stuff with people, as long as it's respectful, right? I won't denigrate anyone for their views. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.